Aaron was saying that he couldn't even afford to buy a new phone because, and I'm just thinking like this grown man, he can't afford a phone. And from what it sounds like his entire family is squatting in this townhouse that Denise is footing the bill for.
Hello, Bravo bosses. This is the Bravo Investigator podcast. I am your host, Dana, and today on our Monday Reality Roundup, we are talking about The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, Love is Blind, Southern Charm, Next Gen NYC, The Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, McBee Dynasty, and The Real Housewives of Miami. And today, joining me, you know her, you love her, the star of The Real Housewives of the OC, Miss Kiki Monique.
Hi.
How are you, Kiki?
I'm doing great.
I'm so happy to have you here. Can we assume you were not at the Real Housewives of OC reunion this past week or 2 weeks ago?
I was not at the reunion, no.
Thank the Lord. Are you happy that that's all sort of like settled?
I know that my name was brought up because I know that Shannon said on Jeff Lewis that I did come up as a topic, but I expected that. I mean, I was part of I think 4 episodes, but I expected nothing less. So whatever, it'll get done. We'll be done with it. We'll move on to season 20, hopefully.
Crazy to think that we're in 20 seasons. The OC is the actually only housewife show I haven't seen from the beginning. And people tell me, you have to go, you have to watch. So I'm currently on season 8. And it's so wild watching, maybe this was last week when I was on season 7 or maybe 6, but I'm watching literally the same storylines happen over and over again with Gretchen and Slade, where they feel like they're being talked about, the deadbeat dad, we want to confront Tamra. It's really interesting to watch sort of 15 years later, the same things happen over and over again. So that's kind of wild.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Not much going on. But you have a lot going on because you actually spent last week at Denise Richards' trial. And so can you clarify what this trial was? My understanding it was to get a permanent restraining order against her ex-husband, Aaron Phypers. Is that how you pronounce his name? I always say Phypers.
I say Phypers. I think that's how I've been hearing it in the courtroom.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was more of a hearing rather than a trial. I mean, I guess, they have a judge who's listening to testimony. And yeah, right now, Denise has a temporary restraining order against Aaron, and she's trying to make it permanent. And by permanent, that's 5 years. And, and with that, she also wants, some of her, intimate photos and her property she says he has back and that sort of thing. And so the judge is listening to testimony from her and her witnesses and testimony from him and his witnesses, and then he'll make a ruling. This normally goes pretty quickly, but we have reached 4 days of this testimony, which is very long for a hearing of this sort. So I didn't attend the first 2 days because they were, during days that I was usually at the studio. I went to the third day.
Radio Andy, shout out.
I went to the third day. Again, I had to be at the studio, so I was only there for half a day. And then finally they had a 4th day that was on a Friday, so I was there all day. Mm-hmm.
That's amazing. So can you walk us through it? I mean, you were doing a little bit in your stories talking about what people were testifying, and I found it so fascinating. You were talking about some text messages between Denise and his mother, and she's saying, basically there's conversations where they're referring to a he, but she wouldn't say who the he was to the judge, right? So can you just sort of walk us through, because I feel like you were so baffled by some of the things that you heard, you were so turned off. That's what the sense that I got from reading some of your stories. So I would love for you to just be able to walk us through what you're able to tell us in terms of testimony, what you felt, what you heard, and just the vibe that you were getting overall.
Yeah, I mean, when Denise and her witnesses were testifying, this really centers around what happened on July 4th.
Right.
When, that was pretty much the incident that started this whole restraining order, when Denise said, essentially, she was, he came, he hit her, the bill of her hat, and there was and then the father came over the next day, they threatened to expose her text messages, her intimate photos, and then she claims that he stole her laptop and those sorts of things. But prior to that, when Denise released photos from 2022 that showed her black eye, that was, everyone sort of saw that, and that was the first time we had seen the allegations of real spousal abuse.
Right.
Aaron, of course, is denying all of this. But when Aaron testified and his parents obviously testified on his behalf, Denise's attorneys were trying to show that Aaron's family was aware of his behavior, because they're trying to say they've never seen him be threatening. They've never seen him put hands on Denise. They've never seen him use threatening language. And in these text messages that were screenshots of texts between Denise and Aaron's mother, she was saying things like, does he remember what happened? I'm just paraphrasing, does he remember what happened? And the mom said something along the lines of, he knows he did something bad. But obviously they're not saying Aaron or anything like that. And the mom was essentially alluding to, these messages were so long ago. I don't know what I was talking about. I don't remember these things. That could be taken out of context. That he could have been anything. That was out of control. It could have been the dog. And it was just very much like, they were not going to budge, her or the father. And then what I just found was so interesting was, Aaron essentially claims that he has no money. He said that he found his cell phone broken and smashed in the trash. When Denise went back for her rebuttal, she admitted that she did throw his phone in the trash. She said that's because he had lost his phone. He'd been looking for his phone. He didn't know where his phone was. The next day, she did find it, but that was after the father and him had threatened to expose text messages and intimate photos that they had taken from her laptop. So when she found the phone, she said she did throw it in the trash. And that was why, because she was getting threats. And Aaron was saying that he couldn't even afford to buy a new phone because, and I'm just thinking, like, this grown man, he can't afford a phone. And from what it sounds like his entire family is squatting in this townhouse that Denise is footing the bill for, because even during the testimony, they said, well, Aaron's parents have to take the stand, but we have to give them like a 10 or 15 minute heads up because they have to get to a location that has internet. So I'm putting the pieces together, and it sounds like they must be still living in this house. Aaron says that house hasn't had internet since July. And it just
poor them living in squalor.
I just don't know what's going on, and the whole thing it's really, I just feel like Denise, she's already gone through this really tough divorce with Charlie Sheen that was very public. I feel for her having to go through this another very public divorce, and part of me sometimes feels guilty even being there. You hear very intimate details, and even though obviously you're allowed to report on whatever, I don't feel comfortable sharing some of the things that were talked about in the testimony, because also not necessarily, I believe, Aaron's bringing up very intimate details of like medical procedures and those sorts of things, and I'm just like, that just feels kind of nasty. But at the end of the day, Denise is like, I just want my these pictures back because she had surgeries, and she says he has footage from all these surgeries. He claims that she has all, the equipment from his Malibu center. He claims that Denise has all of the equipment. Now, Denise said, I have packed all that equipment up. It's gone to a storage facility. They've packed it all away. I've sent all that information over to his attorney. He can pick it up. I've paid it through the end of October. And he has every right to go pick it up. They can drop it off, whatever you want. And I'm just curious, like, go get your equipment. But I'm thinking, do you even have a place to take this equipment anymore, sir? That's probably why you haven't picked it up.
But also go sell it then, right? Because you're no longer running that center. You claim you're so poor. You claim you need to spend $150,000 a month on clothes. For what? All your white t-shirts and jeans? Like, it's very confusing. And I don't know, I always say this because I basically report on this weekly, because there basically is an update on this weekly. I say this weekly where I feel like this is the only scenario where everyone is on one person's side, because no one has ever liked this guy. We've always thought he was creepy. We always thought he was weird. We always got this, like, maybe abusive vibe from him. And so everything that he's doing, every time he talks to the media, everybody's just like, shut up. Nobody believes you. Nobody feels bad for you. Was there anything, to give him the benefit of the doubt, was there anything that you saw in trial that you thought, okay, I believe this man, or okay, he's making some good arguments? Anything?
No, I mean, I watch him on the stand, and I just see a lot of deflection and blame. He wants to bring up Denise's drinking, and even the judge said, well, there's nothing wrong with, it's not illegal to drink. She's an adult. So what do you know, what are you trying to get at? And he's just like, are you trying to say that, that the alcohol had something to do with, the incident and the abuse? And the lawyer's like, well, no, because we're saying that the abuse never happened. He's like, okay, well then the alcohol doesn't play a factor, because if you're saying the abuse didn't happen, then we don't have to bring the alcohol in it because you're saying it didn't happen. And those sorts of things. They replayed Aaron's, because that was the thing that really stood out. It was those interviews. So we know Aaron had done that TMZ interview. They played the interview in court, which just sent me into this total cringe and ick, because again, it was a lot of Denise has these problems and she's doing these things and yada, yada, yada. Then what came up was the Daily Mail article that came out. Now, in that Daily Mail,
that one.
I didn't read it, because this was the Daily Mail article where, I guess, intimate pictures he had taken. He was her photographer for OnlyFans. So intimate pictures.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And that's why he's wanting to take half of her earnings from OnlyFans, because he said, I took those pictures, which let's talk about that later. But there were also intimate text messages between Denise and Rudy Reyes. Rudy Reyes is one of the instructors from Special Forces, and he said that was proof that she was having an affair, and these were leaked. So when her attorney was questioning about if you're saying you didn't, take these from her, or he said he did take the photos and the text messages from her phone. He said he did it because when he found out, he thought he needed proof if he was going to file for divorce. He needed backup to show that, she was cheating. They said, okay, then how did those end up in the Daily Mail? And he was essentially like, I talked to my, my mom and my brother and my father about it because I was so upset. I was so heartbroken that she cheated on me. I talked to people, and I talked to my friend Terry. And they were like, well, who's Terry? And he was like, well, Terry's just my buddy. And they were like, doesn't Terry work for the Daily Mail? And he was like, no.
Oh my God.
And then it was like kind of going on like, who is Terry? Who is Terry? Find out Terry is his publicist. So they're saying, okay, so your friend Terry, who's a friend, who's now a publicist, you happen to send naked photos of your wife to him, and they end up in the Daily Mail, and you didn't know that was going to happen? Did you not ask your friend Terry, how did these photos that I just sent you? And he was like, well, no, I didn't. It just, again, it was like a lot of stuff that like, we are smart enough as humans to understand like how this works. And so trying to put the blame off. And then what the funniest part was when the mother and the father are very elderly, and they were testifying remotely. And so they were having a lot of trouble connecting, all of the things. They had a green screen on. And when the father was up, he kept looking to the left. And the lawyers were like, who is he looking to? Because you're not supposed to be testifying with any sort of help from anyone else. And at one point, the green screen glitched, and a person was sitting right next to Aaron's dad.
Oh my God.
And we were like, who was that? We're looking around. I'm in the reporter's row, and we're just kind of like, who was that? And then they were like, sir, the judge is like, sir, who's with you? And he's looking over, and he's like, no one. And they were like, and we were like, we just saw someone, sir. And then he was like, just my wife is here helping me or whatever. And then the lawyers were like, Judge, we saw exactly someone's there. That is Terry. It was Terry who was sitting next to Aaron's dad. So then I think they finally had to admit, because then he got off, and then he said, well, Terry was just there to help him set up the internet. Terry's downstairs now. He's not in the room, which, again, we kept hearing sort of sounds throughout the thing. So it was just things like that where I just felt like we weren't going to get what we needed. I think to me the most compelling testimony, I wasn't there that day, but I read about it, was Aaron's own cousin who worked at the center.
Right. And can you remind us of what she said?
Yeah, she saw the abuse. She saw him hit Denise. She saw the black eye. So to me, that was very compelling. Now he's trying to claim that cousin essentially doesn't know what she's talking about. And also, I believe that's the same cousin, that he's claiming needed a visa to work in the United States, and because he didn't renew it, is bitter at him. Now, we'll get to, all of that, but.
Us Canadians just trying to get over to the US.
Yeah.
We don't want Aaron back, I have to say. He is from Toronto. We do not want him back.
Yeah.
Wow, this is so interesting. I'm curious, though. I mean, maybe you don't know, but I'm curious if that counts as like witness tampering, to have like this other person in the background, like influencing it. Like, I wonder if at any stage, whether Denise's lawyers could have said, hey, like, this is a mistrial. Like, I don't even know if that counts because it's a hearing, like you said.
Yeah.
I don't really know, like, all the procedural rules and stuff like that. But, like, while you and I are laughing, that's funny. I wonder if this is, like, you know, serious enough that someone should have, like, you know, done something or made them actually come be in person, because, you know, they are obviously very important witnesses in this case. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to tell the truth, but they've been living in her houses. They've been privy to what's been going on. So I just find that whole situation a little bit insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge, here's the thing. I really like the judge, very, like, you know, no BS. And essentially when the dad said, you know, it's just my, you know, wife testifying, at that point she had already testified.
Right.
And he said, because Terry wasn't on the witness list, technically that's not a problem that Terry's in the room. Because Terry isn't going to testify, they can be in the room. They're just not supposed to be assisting, which, you know, we didn't technically see assisting. So I think, you know, but ultimately I don't think their testimony was going to sway one way or the other, because both parents pretty much said the exact same thing. We got the same information, what we needed to. And so, you know, but again, like, they were very much, it was very pedantic in there. Every lawyer was objecting, like, it felt like every 2 seconds. So those objections are anything that would be used later if they wanted to appeal, you know.
So how did the whole thing end? Because we definitely saw you pop up and be like, oh my God, Aaron was just arrested. But before that, did the hearing end with a decision in terms of the longevity of the restraining order?
We were hoping to get a decision that day, and so were Denise's attorneys. They were even very much like, we can close today and do closing arguments. But Aaron's attorney was like, I'm not prepared for closing arguments. Plus, we have 2 more witnesses we would like to see. And the judge was like, well, let me hear what these other 2 witnesses are. And he said what the other 2 witnesses are, and he basically scraped one of the witnesses. He's like, no, they're just going to say the same thing that we've already heard from other witnesses. We don't need them. But the other witness was going to basically testify to that visa situation to say, yes, she needed the visa and she was mad. So the judge was like, well, that's very limited, but it is kind of like, it could lend itself to bias. So I will listen to her. So he's going to let that one more witness testify. Then they're going to get closing arguments. And so there was no decision. But what happened was, he said, so our final day is just going to be this one witness, closing arguments, and then I'm going to make a judgment. So he said, before that, he said, before the end of the day, I want you to, because they have a bunch of transcripts that weren't correctly transcribed. He said, I want you, both attorneys, to get together and figure out these transcripts, and I want you to finalize your exhibits to me so that all of that is submitted. So that's why we were in this weird pause where the court day wasn't over, but we were just sitting in the courtroom. So we were kind of like in the hallway. I'm making, post updates, and we're just kind of sitting there. And then we go out into the hallway and we see like 6 or 7 sheriffs. And it's not normal. Like when you see like one sheriff and they do like a shift change, that's about pretty much it. 6 or 7 sheriffs, that was not normal. So something is definitely happening. So we're kind of like looking around, like what's going on. And then we see them go into the courtroom, and then they bring Aaron out. And when of course, we're trying to get as close as we can to see what's happening. The sheriffs were like, back up. So I'm just trying to listen on what's happening.
I'm a journalist.
That's why they were like, back up. And they pretty much were like, you could hear them talking. I heard, them saying like, we have an outstanding warrant. There was definitely a little bit of like kind of back and forth. Like Aaron was not, I don't think, anticipating being arrested. I don't think he knew why he was being let, because when we went back in, there was 3 reporters who were still in the courtroom when they brought him out. And we asked him like, did they come in and did they put handcuffs on him in the courtroom? They were like, no, they just came and he stood up, he walked out. It seemed like he was clueless as what was going on. And then later the sheriff came in and got his phone and brought it back. But yeah, they were like, put your hands behind your back. And then they took him down a separate entrance down the escalator so we couldn't follow him or see. And he was gone. And, and so the judge pretty much came back in the courtroom and we just, finished the day and then said, we'll be back, November 7th. But yeah.
But wait, what does that mean? So who pressed charges? Who pressed spousal abuse charges?
So I think this was related to spouse abuse. I don't know if the outstanding warrant is related to the spouse abuse that was happening in the July incident or if it was happening from the 2022 incident from the Black Eye. That's what I'm not clear on, and I need to get more clarification. But this was from spousal abuse, so this is, obviously a separate case. So he was booked into the Lost Hills sheriff, department. He and it was, booked as a spousal corporal abuse against a spouse, or they listed it because that's what they call like it's a charge that could be either a misdemeanor or a felony depending on, and it looked like it had charge F, so it was a felony. He was released on $200,000 bond, which again, I know you only have to come up with 10% and to get a bail bondsman, but I don't even know in his life who has $20,000,
Exactly.
But someone did, immediately bailed him out. He was out that night. And so I was shocked because it was Friday. I thought you even had to go in front of a judge. It probably wouldn't have been till Monday, but
yeah,
they were quick.
Well, he came out smiling. I thought that was a bit weird, but other than that, yeah, I think this whole thing is just going to keep on going, and I'm glad that you're here to give us all the deets, and definitely keep us updated as to what happens next.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on to Love is Blind, because there's a lot going on in that sphere. Are you watching this season?
I am. Very uncomfortably, but yes.
Wild, right? Like, when I walked into the first season, I'm watching like the first 15 minutes, and I'm like, oh, this is good, I'm into this. And then everyone is just extremely racist and homophobic. And I'm like, oh, wow. And I'm saying things to my friends like, I cannot believe these people said these things on TV. And they're like, that's the United States. They're not going to get any flack for it. I'm like, well, that's concerning. But, we've definitely seen an eclectic group of people here in Denver, Colorado. And it's been an interesting season in the sense that there's definitely a lot to unpack, a lot of nuances in terms of these relationships. But I'm not really rooting for anyone. How about you?
No, that's the thing. Like, I feel like every season I go, I think I dislike most of these people.
Yeah.
And I'm also realizing, because I'm getting older, I'm just not relating to a lot of the problems and issues that they have. I'm like, you're being a brat.
Yeah.
You need to stop, is kind of how I feel.
I noticed that as well in this cast because they are quite young. And we are going to start with Madison and Joe, who we know broke up in the last drop of episodes. But Madison and Joe, I mean, they are so young, right? They're in their mid-20s. They're 26 and 27. And I felt like the majority of their fights were just like drunk nonsense fights that weren't really coming from anywhere. So she was on the Love to See It podcast, which is one of my faves. It's like they do basically like dating shows from a feminist lens, which is my jam. Yeah. So she was on that podcast, and she was talking about basically that her and Joe actually broke up the night before than what we saw on camera. So they go and do the tux fitting, the dress fitting. Then they all went to like a bar afterwards. So like some of the couples, and he's acting sort of weird. And then Casey, remember Casey, the little racist Casey, she comes up to him, puts her hands on his chest, and is just like, and just being really flirty. And he even described it to Madison as like her giving him like googly eyes. So he ends up breaking up with her that night and says, like, you're not my person. And we see that the next day on camera. So he comes back to, like, replicate it, basically, right? And so she's saying that the reason that she brought up the whole, like, well, is it because we just saw the singles? That was because of the night before. There was, like, a whole scene that we sort of didn't get to see. Now, interestingly enough, this just came up, like, basically, like, yesterday. So Joe has a girlfriend. He's had a girlfriend for like a year, serious relationship. Now, we know he's not really a serious relationship maybe type of guy, but okay, you go off, man. So this girl went on the Reality Receipts podcast, which is the Reality Ashley and Storytime with Ricky, and she said that apparently Joe and Casey went on a few dates. So this was so I guess this was like in between Madison and when he's dating his current girlfriend now, who he's been with for like a year. And this girl says that like Casey continued to keep texting him, knowing that he has this girlfriend. Just be like, hey, what's up? How are you? And it's like, Casey, you fucked up so darn hard at the beginning of this process, right? I feel like she should not have even like started talking online and sort of, I think she was just making things worse for herself. And I thought, I always try to see other people's sides, and maybe you got a really bad at it. I don't really believe the things I'm saying. I'm just trying to be positive here. But then, girl, you go and you do these things. You're trying to go after people who are in other relationships. First with Joe and Madison, because they were still married at that point, and now Joe in his other relationship. So, like, what are your thoughts on Casey and, like, this girl? What do you think of this girl?
Well, Casey, obviously, you could tell she thought she was a very attractive, hot girl, and she was going to be the hottest girl, at the show. And so she has lived her whole life with that, where nobody has ever really said no to her, and she's gotten everything she's wanted. And so I just think, and also, I don't know, how old is Casey? I'm assuming she's in her, like, late 20s.
I want to say 29, but I'm not positive.
Okay. so I think it lends itself to that. And ultimately, I think that Casey wants to be a reality star.
Exactly.
As many of these people do. So all of those things combined, you're going to get this level of villain, which I'm conflicted about, because I have this whole thing now where villains do make the best reality TV, but we're entering an era where villains are very hard to exist in reality because of the audience and the social media. They're very hard to exist. And so I almost just want her to push it, because I'm like, bring back that old school villain era.
Yeah.
And I want to see it. But I don't think she will fully go there. So it just feels like this weird sort of like in between mediocre, which just feels like a icky person, which you don't really want to, you can't even root behind.
Yeah, you make an interesting point, because there's the villain that we can love, like a Dexter, right? And then there's the villains that we don't. And it's a difficult dance. It's a delicate dance to find yourself to be a villain that people can also, I mean, let's say Tamara, right? Like, I don't like Tamara, but people do, right? And so there's a market for the villainess of Tamara, right? And she is a good reality star. She is a good villain on her show. She knows how to do her job. Casey, on the other hand, is doing really bad reality TV. And she's doing it wrong. So I think if her plan was to become a reality TV star, she didn't do it right, and I don't think it's going to end up the way she had hoped.
Well, and it's a different format, because we're not getting to know these people. Like, okay, a Jax Taylor, if we were introduced to a Jax Taylor in 2025, I just don't think he would thrive the way he did in, whatever year they started. And so, yeah, that's sort of the difference. And also the format. We got to know Jax over several seasons. We're meeting these people in and we know Love is Blind edits the hell out of these things, I'm not saying that causes bad edit. What I'm saying is, like, we just don't get to know the real them.
Right.
So it's like, that's why for me, it's like, I just find that I don't get invested in which I'm surprised that the Love is Blind characters make so much money on podcasts and all of these things, because I don't get invested in them in the same way because of that specifically. And so I watch the season, I never follow most of the people, and then I move on with my life, and I don't care about them. And so, that's kind of how I feel. I'm kind of like, well, if she wants to flirt with the other guy, I guess let her flirt. Obviously watching how she did, sorry, I can't even remember the guy. Patrick, how she did Patrick was cringe to watch, because it was almost like she knew she was going to get a bad edit. So she did everything in her power to be like, no, but I really like you, and I'm going to put my legs around you and jump and kiss and all of these things. But then as I'm walking out, I'm never going to see you again. Like,
wild. That girl is wild. Okay, but speaking of bad edits, so Annie Lancaster, she was the one who was with Nick, and we also see them break up in the last drop of episodes. She was on the Vile Files this past week, and a lot of people have been coming for her online for her comments about the LGBTQ community. She was saying during the pods that she wouldn't be like yay if her kid just turned out to be gay. She was talking about it being a fad, talked about spanking children. I forget, there was something else that she said that was off-putting. I forget what it was, something transphobic. But, people were sort of looking to her social media and waiting for an apology, and nothing sort of came. So this was like the first interview that she's done, and she explained that, she's not homophobic. It was the way that it was edited. She said that they were actually talking about over-sexualization in children's shows when she said it was a fad, which is confusing. The other thing I found confusing was she said that she felt that people were put off by her pause. So Nick asks the question, how would you feel if your child were gay? She pauses. I don't remember the pause. She pauses and said, well, I wouldn't be like, yay, but I would still love my child regardless, and then says all the other things that she had said. But she says that people were so put off by her pause. And the pause was for her thinking, well, there are so many people in my life who are in that community, and they've struggled. And so for that reason, it's what made me think of, like, their life being a struggle. No one was upset about your pause, though, in my opinion, Annie. It was like the actual words that were spoken. So I'm curious your thoughts on that. I mean, that's a huge edit, right? Like, if you're saying that they were literally splicing other pieces together and literally making the public feel like you were homophobic and transphobic, I mean, that's huge. Like, we have seen people sue Love is Blind in the past, not successfully.
Yeah.
But if that were me and that were true, I would be coming at him.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would too, but I also know these contracts are ironclad. So you kind of like, I mean, I think some of them literally say, like, we can create fake storylines about you, and like, that's it. And that's why, again, it's roll your dice. It's again, I don't want to agree with everyone that I watch on TV, and I
No.
don't normally either. But you kind of have to stand behind your beliefs. Like, I don't want to flip-flopper either. Like, if you really are 10 toes down on that, then be 10 toes down. If
Right.
not, I don't even know how something like that would come out of your mouth, because I would never be in a position where you could misdrew, like, no, I stand behind the LGBTQ community, and if my kid was in that community, I would support. Like, it doesn't seem like something that you would flip-flop about. You wouldn't. So
Right.
that's why I'm like, either stand on business or don't.
Right. And I felt like there was this thing about this cast, and, you know, I don't know anything about Denver, Colorado, but they just really seem very almost like stunted, or very just in sort of like a different place when we're talking about like gender roles, and it just every single couple, I just felt like we were talking about couples from like 20, 30 years ago as opposed to couples from 2025. And we did experience this a bit in last season. We found a lot of stunted men and a lot of women who were a lot more woke and had a lot more, perspective on the world, while the men were just sort of like, you know, I've never even eaten a taco. You know, it's just sort of strange. But like this just sort of felt like we were going backwards.
Yeah, I feel like it's almost like a lot of these people never had relationships. And I have a theory about that, because especially Madison, when Madison got all over Joe, he was drunk. We could tell he was drunk. He was clearly heavily intoxicated. He had to go pass out in the hotel room. She comes over to his bed. She wakes him up and she's trying to talk to him. He has no idea what's going on. And I'm like, girl, have you ever been around a drunk person? And also, have you just been around someone who just woke up? He's trying to figure out what's happening. He does not know. He doesn't even know.
Have you ever woken up before?
Like, I've woken up in other countries and I've been like, where am I? Like,
yeah.
Get it. And she was like picking at him. I'm like, girl, leave this man alone. Let him sleep off his drug and talk to him in the morning. And then she's crying and doing. And it was very much like, this is how I behaved like when I was a teenager, when I had no idea like what the world was. And a lot of them do feel a little bit immature in that sense. And I had this thought, because I was like, you know, obviously they do a lot of STD testing before these shows, because people are just going to be having sex and doing all of these things and whatever. And I was like, I'm shocked that as many people still can get through the rounds as they can, because when you hear the statistics about, you know, herpes, it would seem statistically that most of these season had people with herpes based on what we know about the numbers. So I was in my head and I was thinking, well, man, maybe they are just finding like really inexperienced or sort of people, and that's why you're also getting this kind of immature level, and might get even worse, because I don't know. I just had a weird theory about that.
That's really interesting. I mean, there's something about Joe that I felt was sort of not even just immature, but almost as if someone had said, let's place a dare. We're going to throw you onto this show. You're going to wake up in the morning in one of the pods. It really felt like he woke up there. He had no idea that he was going to be on this show, that there was going to be weddings in 3 weeks, or what this process was. And considering he had literally been through something similar where he was engaged for 5 years, he felt really, you know, like he couldn't go through with it. He couldn't put the envelopes in the mail. And here you are in an expedited process, which would, in theory, be counterintuitive to, like, you know, what you did before, where you were like, you know, I sort of needed more time and I need to think about it. And now you put yourself in this process where you barely get the time to know someone. And I feel like that's why he seemed so confused as to, like, you know, I'm struggling with this and it's so hard, which I did understand on his end. And I did understand why he wanted that sort of validation from Madison to be like, isn't this weird? But at the same time, it just felt like he didn't intend to be here. Like someone put him there as a dare.
I do wonder if when the casting process happens, because I remember I went to that Road Rules anniversary sort of live show that they did back like a few months ago.
That. Okay.
And they were talking about, audience was asking them about, being on the show or being on that show, because Mark Long, he hadn't originally applied to be on Road Rules. I think he was like the roommate from San Francisco that didn't get picked, and then he ended up on Road Rules. Anyways, all that to say is people were saying like when they were applying to MTV, they'd be like, I don't want to be on this show. I want to be on this show. And they didn't know and then they would end up on one of the shows.
Right.
I almost wonder if in the casting, right, they see, because Joe's a very attractive guy. They see this guy, hey, we have this perfect match and we have these things that you'd be great for, but you kind of have to go through this first. Or, you know, like, we
That's
want
a
to
good
cast
point.
you. Would you be opening to like dating women? Sure. And then you end up on Love is Blind. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then you kind of keep going through the process because you're like, I want to end up, sure, in these Netflix dating shows.
Yeah.
But I just think that there's a lot that happens with casting because, you know, they got to find a lot of people to go through for these. And the Love is Blind is so far ahead. And like, they have already filmed like 2 seasons that are just batched right now.
Right. People could literally be divorced, pregnant, lots of different things by now. This filmed, I believe, in March 2024, so quite some time ago. So it really is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's a real struggle to find quality singles. But isn't that the point that we're all struggling with? If I could find a quality single, I wouldn't be single, right?
Well,
So, I mean, I guess there aren't a lot of great people out there, and that's sort of the point. But I'll still watch it.
I'll still watch it, but I think that like we can confidently answer the question, love is not blind.
Oh,
because
absolutely.
even when what's that chick's name, the really rich one, Sparkly
Sparkle Megan, yeah.
When Sparkle Megan, when the guy that she turned down was like, me and Jordan are so different, her first instinct was like, well, what do you mean what do you think he meant by different? Like, he didn't say anything physically. And that was the first place her mind went to, was like, oh my God, like, what is Jordan? And you could just tell these people, like, they're going to be affected by whether they're attracted. And that's fair. Like, you know, like, fine. If that's your thing, love is not blind then. So don't go on the show.
No, but the first season, it was like everyone was hot anyway, right? So it was like, yeah, love isn't blind, but thank God you're hot. So it just worked out. Now, maybe that's just not necessarily always the case, that people aren't conventionally models or conventionally attractive to everyone. But I think everybody just sort of was like, thank God, right? Like, you turned out to be hot and all is well. But that just hasn't like continued throughout the seasons in terms of that mentality.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Southern Charm. And it's funny that we actually have some news coming out of here because we have a new season starting November the 19th, which I am excited about. But Olivia, whose last name I cannot remember, who was previously
I believe.
Flowers, thank you. That's actually a very easy name to remember. So we get this post from her wedding venue, I believe. It's called Cabin Creative. This is October 14th. It says, after much thought and many heartfelt conversations, Olivia and her fiancé Alex have made the difficult decision not to move forward with their wedding. This was not a decision made lightly, but one grounded in deep mutual respect and love for one another. While this isn't the path they originally envisioned, they are profoundly grateful for the love and support of their friends and family. Alex and Olivia remain committed to each other with a renewed sense of clarity, strength, and appreciation for honoring one's heart. That's some interesting wording. She is very appreciative of your grace and kindness as they move through this transition together. So it is black screen, white writing as we always see, but this is from like a third party that I've never seen. Did you find that
her
odd?
Publicist.
Oh, okay.
I think it's her publicist, which is even more interesting, right? Because normally I think even if it's written by your publicist, they normally act like it's written by you.
Right. It's a little strange. It's interesting because I do believe that this was one of the main reasons this relationship was one of the main reasons that Olivia was not asked back to Southern Charm, because she was living mostly wherever Alex lives. I believe it's in Dallas. Okay. So they were saying that because you are not, living in South Carolina all the time, we don't really think that this is the best fit for you going forward. So it's interesting that now they've broken up. We didn't really know anything about their relationship because they started dating after the show or in between seasons. I guess I'm still sort of shocked because we've seen so much media attention towards it. Like, I've seen so many pictures of her in like
she did an exclusive with People, I think, for her bachelor party or bachelorette or something like that. Yeah.
What do you think happened?
I mean, I don't know. Anytime a wedding is abruptly canceled, I always think it has to do with infidelity. Now, I don't know, but like I tend to think, or the fact that there was so much pressure, because again, the fact that you had these exclusive People shoots and all of these things, it does feel like a high pressure wedding also at the same time. So but I would love to know. I would love to have her back on Southern Charm, and I'm a little upset that I actually don't understand why she didn't get asked back, even if she was not really. I'm sure she would have come to film, but I guess it wouldn't have been as authentic because she wouldn't have been dating and that sort of thing. But
I feel like that happens all the time, right? But people do get kicked off for that. Isn't that the reason that Sheena didn't get to be full-time for season 10? Because she said on a podcast she was living in San Diego. Like, who cares where you really live? Doesn't Wendy live like 2 hours outside of Potomac? Like,
barely. None of those women live in Potomac. Yeah, like, barely. Yeah.
Ridiculous. Okay, well, we had J-Lo on Watch What Happens Live, which was huge. And, I just love how everything comes back to Bravo. And I'm sure you recall that scene many years back on Southern Charm. It was one of the reunions. Craig was like completely high. And oh my God, I'm trying to remember what happened. He accused Madison of asking A-Rod, who was engaged to J-Lo at the time, to come on her boat. And they were having like a conversation about that. And then shortly thereafter, A-Rod and J-Lo break up. So Andy is asking her about this on Watch What Happens Live. I'm curious if you saw the clip and if you analyzed it the way I did, because I'm looking at her eyes as he's asking the question. He's like, so there's this show called Southern Charm. And she's like, okay. Like, she looked like she was really confused, had never heard of it. This is the first time, she's getting a lot of information. She's like, okay, let me take this all in. And then she essentially says nothing, right? She essentially says, because basically Andy's like, is that what ended your relationship, right? Was it Madison LeCroy? And she's just like, I just don't want to talk about it or get into my past ever again. So no real answer there, but do you think that this was the reason, and do you believe that she did not really know what Southern Charm was? Because she was giving that vibe at the beginning, but I don't know.
No, I think she knows exactly who Southern Charm is. I think she knows who Madison LeCroy is. And look, I love J-Lo. I feel for her. I wish she wouldn't do some of the things she does, but I cheerlead for her in the back to like get it together. I think in that moment she wanted to take a page out of Mariah Carey, because Mariah Carey would have been like, who? Exactly how she does to J-Lo. Who?
Right.
What? But she's not. She's too A-type. She knows what's going on. She can't be that girl. So she tried to do it, but it was flip-flop, and then that's why I think it got awkward. She wanted to just be like, I don't know who these people are, but she knew.
I wish she had just said it. That would have been so awesome for us as Bravo fans to make that full circle connection. Oh, that was wild. What a time. What a time to be alive, right? And now we love Madison LeCroy, right? It's like such a different time. We're back when she's screaming at Austin to like shut his Muppet mouth. I mean, that was... Yeah.
Now she's doing... I think she just did like a branding deal for the baby formula with Cardi B. Did you see that ad?
No, that's amazing.
I think like Cardi B has like a new sort of like really good organic baby formula, and but yeah, she's just a mommy now,
I'm a mommy. All right, let's move on to Next Gen NYC. So I do believe that we are in filming, and the reason I believe that is because Ariana Biermann and her boyfriend Hudson have broken up, which I'm actually really, really sad about. I'm going to read her statement, which says, Hudson and I have decided to go our separate ways. While these things are never easy, we both know it's what's best for us right now. We are so grateful for all of the love and support you've shown us over the years. Sometimes love takes you in different directions, and that's okay. Love you all. And then he made a statement saying, I feel like everyone deserves to hear both sides of our story. I still and always will love Ariana. She's been there for me at times when I couldn't be there for myself. I still have a lot of things I need to heal from and deal with on my own to become the person I truly want to be. I appreciate all of the love and support everyone is showing us during this difficult time. Then Ariana came out and being like, I need somewhere to live, and Riley's like, moving down the street. So basically they're going to be living down the street from each other, and we did see cameras pick up, and, we saw this stuff kind of play out online, where we saw some cameras in the background as, they're moving out of their apartment. So we definitely know we're getting some filming for season 2, but were you really shocked by this breakup? Because I was.
I was really shocked by the breakup. They obviously really cared for each other, and they were also friends before they started dating, I believe, and he was very close to the family. But the reason I'm not shocked is because I think a lot came out about that relationship with Ariana and Kim, and the money and sort of how Ariana helps Kim financially and just everything. And also, Kim and Kroy are still going through their divorce. And I just think that the parents were like, they're billionaires,
Right.
They're like, I think that we need to be a little more maybe protective. I don't want you getting taken advantage of, because I'm sure, Hudson probably obviously financially was helping the situation with them living together, and who knows where money was going towards Kim. And I just feel like they just wanted to I think they had I think they might have had a hand in it, honestly.
Interesting, because you had just made the statement that when you see a breakup happen sort of out of nowhere, it's usually cheating related. So I was like, is that what this is? And also, correct me if I'm wrong, and you may not even know because I'm not sure if I made this up, but I feel like in the first episode of Next Gen NYC, Ariana said that they've been on and off for 2 years, or that they've broken up a bunch of times previously.
I don't remember that, but it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah.
I would have to go back and check. But you know what sucks? I mean, I guess I'm wrong, but I just thought they were such a beautiful couple. I felt that despite the fact that this guy clearly has a lot of money, given the way that he dresses, he seems very humble and very down to earth. And he would put her in that place being like, Ariana, you shouldn't be helping out your family. He seemed very mature for his age, right? So that's why I'm very disappointed, because we do see a lot of trash in the Bravo sphere, and it is nice to see a really good guy, especially one that has a lot of money and is very humble about it. So I hope he didn't cheat on her, and if it is something like that, like you're saying, then maybe there is potential for them to get back together once the Zolciaks figure their lives out, or Biermanns, or whatever they are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get cheating vibes from them at all. I mean, he very much was like, he adored her a lot. I just, when you have families that have come from that sort of wealth, you kind of can be a wild child up to a certain point, but then they do start sort of putting not just restrictions, but there's certain things I think that you start realizing that you might not have access to certain funds if you don't start behaving in certain ways, and they don't, and I think that that's what happens. I can't even imagine trying to, date someone from a wealthy or well-established family, because they just look at your pedigree and that sort of thing, and they just sort of judge you. And I just imagine it would be very hard. But honestly, they're so young. I want them. Because also, I'm so glad she's loving New York. Being a single girl in New York is hands down one of the most fun things ever. It's also one of the most heartbreaking. You go through a lot of heartbreak, but there's nothing like it. And so I kind of love that her and Riley are just going to be two single girls in New York.
Yeah.
Every 20-something deserves that.
I love that. Except, I'm not even sure if Riley's going to be on the next season, because people were sort of speculating who was filming right now, and she wasn't on the list. That would kill me. I absolutely loved her on this show. I just thought she had such a fun vibe, and seeing Candy and Todd as well, that was really cool. So I hope she'll be back.
I can't imagine, even if first of all, I can't imagine she didn't come back, but I can't imagine she doesn't at least have a friend overall, because her and Ariana literally gonna be living, I think, in the same building, or at least right next to each other. So I can't imagine that. But Queens of Bravo said that Charlie was coming back, which is, I think, the most shocking. I was not expecting that.
I mean, I guess I expect it, because again, we talk about villains, right? But I feel like someone like that is more like a dangerous villain. There's the necessary villains, and then there's dangerous villains. Someone who will get so upset about a speaker that they will call you a whore and a slut and a bitch. To me, this person is vile, right? I could see him, I could be wrong, I could be very wrong, and I'm just speculating, allegedly. I could see this guy becoming violent, just the way that he sort of acts. And he obviously is he's stunted as well. We've talked about stunted men, and that has a lot to do with the way that he was brought up, his money, that kind of thing. But he also just doesn't have anything to do with his life because of his money, and so he ends up just getting so angry and upset about things that don't matter, because these rich kids have nothing else to do. I worry about him becoming a Jax Taylor or a James Kennedy down the road. But in 10 years from now, what are we going to say then, once they've, done something really terrible? We're going to be like, how come we let them be on TV for this long? So I feel like we should be learning from our mistakes and not letting people that are sort of giving James Kennedy vibes an opportunity, right? We gave him the season 1. We see an opportunity for some bad patterns to be happening. And if you let him go season 2, season 3, season 4, then it's going to be a lot more difficult many years down the road to get rid of this guy. And I just wish they had done it at the outset. I'm wondering if they're just because obviously we saw the photographs when those crypto bros got arrested for kidnapping that guy, and Charlie seemed to be in the photos outside the house. Now, we still don't know why he was in the photos. Was he crashing on the couch? And so, even if you are allegedly friendly with that type of element, that's concerning. But then also the producer side of you is like, well, I want to hear, if you're willing to tell on camera what happened, then I also am willing to film you to see if we can work this into the season. I mean, just having drugs everywhere in his apartment, the fact that we're filming this and it's different. I mean, it's
mean, like, here's the thing. Like, so when I used to, there was a reality show called Sweet Life. Issa Rae produced it on HBO. It was about young Black kids in LA. And I actually really loved that they would smoke weed, and because it's legal. And so, like, I kind of loved that we were seeing this sort of, like, it's legal in the state, and we kind of do these things, and we're not going to fake it. Whereas, like, you know, because Laguna Beach, they were drinking out of red cups. We knew that they were getting drunk, and like, but we couldn't talk about it. And so I don't know. So I kind of like that, but just with Charlie and all the other behaviors, because he's like, it just seems like he needs to get high. It was not as fun to watch.
Exactly. Like, yeah, exactly. I think there's a little bit of a difference. All right, let's move on to the Real Houses of Salt Lake City. And all I wanted to talk about with this is just that Brittany is getting a cabaret show, and I'm just like, okay, girl, go off, right? Like, usually I feel like these cabaret shows, to me, are more so of a fun activity, like a funny activity. Like, we've seen Sonia Morgan go up on stage and her whole dress falling off and everything. Like, that's what I anticipate to see at one of these shows. I haven't been to any of them. I know Luann came to Toronto on October 9th or 6th. I didn't end up going to it. I can imagine them being like a good time, like a silly, fun, good time, right? But Brittany's voice is actually very good, right? She is showing us all the time. And she may be a lot of things, but she does have a very exquisite voice. So I'm kind of happy for her, and I kind of think I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's already sold out. And so
Really?
you know, I love listening to her sing. I think she's just so, someone said she's so whimsical. And I thought that was such a great, you know, adjective or adverb, whichever one of those, you know, because she is like, she has such great whimsy. And I think it'll be a really fun, I mean, she was on Broadway, off Broadway, whatever. She, you know, so she's, you know, I think she knows how to do it.
She's got a lot of talents, right? She's a realtor. We just found out last week. You know, she's a lady of many talents. And, you know, while being a full-time housewife may not be it, you know, she's at least expanding this opportunity as far as she can. And, like, go off. Good for you. All right, McBee Dynasty. Is this a show that you are watching?
Oh, I watched it from the beginning. I loved it.
So
when it was on Peacock. I love it. Yes.
So good. So I started with season 2 because everybody said, you know, you only need to watch season 2, but I became so obsessed. I went back, watched season 1. It's such an interesting show. I feel like you have such, you know, different types of drama. You have lady drama, you have family drama, you have business drama. The whole Galena of it all, I find her to be the best reality star on television. Prostituta. I am obsessed with her. Despite the fact that she has no emotional regulation, like, I'm here for it. I love watching it. So we've been renewed for season 3. I'm really excited about that. But those watchers or people who watch this may know that Steve Sr., who is the patriarch of the family, was recently just sentenced to 24 months in prison for crop insurance fraud. So this is basically like he was lying about the yields that the crops were yielding, I guess. Yeah. And that in turn, he's now going to jail for 2 years. So we basically didn't see him for the majority of season 2. It was sort of Steve Sr. who took over. You know, but this goes right in line with what we love about Bravo, right? We got, like I said, our lady drama, our financial drama, then we got our legal drama, right? We've got to have some legal drama in our Bravo. So, you know, I don't really care so much about this because we just didn't get a lot of Steve McBee. I feel like we find out a lot more about the rest of the family members, or that's what we've been watching. But I feel like then season 3 is definitely going to be predicated a lot on, like, the aftermath and how the family is going to recover from this. But I guess, what are your thoughts on him being arrested for this or convicted?
You know, I think that the thing I'm most interested in finding out is how the McBee Dynasty and how Bravo treats the family versus, like, the Osefos, right? Like,
that's a great point.
It's 2 people who have been, well, Steve's been found guilty of fraud. Right. He's going to prison. Jen, obviously, Shaw, she's in prison. And so we have people in different levels of fraud. Mm-hmm. I am curious how they will be treated, because obviously we know McBee, everyone loves it. It's getting renewed. He was still part of season 2, like, you know, even though, you know, sporadically. Wendy is now going through the process, hasn't been found guilty of anything, and is just going through it. Jen is going to come out, and where's that? And so I'm more just from, like, a watcher going to see, like, how is this going to be handled? I don't think that Jen Shaw doesn't need to come back to Salt Lake City, only because Salt Lake City has moved on in such a great way. It doesn't need her. However, am I interested in seeing Jen Shaw after prison? I am. And that may be controversial, but I do want to see, because I do believe she's changed, and I would like to see how. I do. I think I'm interested to see how Coach handled it, and with the sons, and her reintroduction into life, and ultimately, I want her to make an income so she can pay back restitution. Those victims deserve to be paid. And so income, she's not going to have many options, and reality TV is going to be one. And let's garnish those wages. Like, prison is there for rehabilitation, and I believe that firmly. And I think that if, she can come out and if they want to do a show that focuses on her, I'm not opposed to that.
So you feel like the criminal justice system should be the body that punishes the people and not the reality TV shows, in a sense.
I just think that you go to prison and it shouldn't be a death sentence, Right. Like, I just don't think that your entire life used to be spent the rest of your life when you come out, especially for white collar. Like, I get it. There were victims and stuff. You served time for that, and you were paying back, and you did a bad thing, and you should be able to, like, get rehabilitated back into the world. Like, we shouldn't just keep punishing you until the end of time.
It's interesting because we talk about whether there's victims or not, and we did that with the Wendy case where they were saying, there are no, like, human victims, but there's the victims of other people whose premiums are going to go up for insurance and things like that. I'm curious then what you think about Bravo, I guess, sort of coming down on her in the sense of taking down the Housewives swap show that she was going to be on. So that's the one thing they've done so far. They haven't removed her from the Real Housewives of Potomac, but they've removed her episode of Wife Swap, right? So do you feel like they're being treated differently? Do you feel like across these three situations that there's a different treatment by Bravo?
So I got a screener, so I got to watch Wendy's episode before they made the decision.
A lot of people got the screener, though, by the way, and then forgot to watch it in time, and then it got retracted, so they didn't get to watch it. So good for you.
And I will say this. I think it could have been one of two things. I honestly think either the producers were protecting Wendy, or the producers were reached out to and they needed that episode as evidence. And I believe if they wanted to protect Wendy, it made sense. You are in her house intimately, and you were up in there seeing all the things they own, they don't own, what she's wearing, what she's not wearing. I think it could have been just that. I don't think it was about a punishment thing. I just think that it was like, why put more? Because people like you and I would scrutinize the hell. Trust me. If it hadn't been a screener, you don't think I would have been like, oh, recorded.
Circle. Zoom in. For sure. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting sentence for Steve McBee. I mean, it really does seem like a victimless crime. I've never heard of crop fraud before, but if it's something that's like, this was an FBI investigation, so obviously it was deemed very serious.
At the end of the day, like the plain language is it's welfare fraud, because essentially what's happening is you're getting the subsidy from the government because you're saying my crops aren't yielding what they did last year, and so I'm not making as much money. Okay, we'll subsidize it. That subsidy is welfare. So in essence, it's kind of like welfare fraud. They just don't call it that for farmers.
Well, then I am very against it. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, Kiki, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been awesome. Can you please let the people know where they can follow you and listen to you and just see what you have going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, on YouTube at The Talk of Shame. And obviously you can listen to me weekdays on Radio Andy, Reality Checked, 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. We talk all things reality.
That's amazing. Thank you, Kiki.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Bravo Investigator podcast in partnership with Hurrdat Media. You can watch full-length videos on Hurrdat Entertainment's YouTube channel. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at the Bravo Investigator. If you enjoy the show, please leave me a 5-star review. Love you, BBs. See you next time.
A Hurrdat Media Production.